Hey folks, and welcome back to the channel. In this video, we are going to be talking about the big update that just dropped here as the off season is coming to a close and the second season of 2025 is underway, that being for the competitive scene, of course. We already see our first event going on of the season, so to speak, with the Fissure Playground event, and I Am Cologne is just around the corner. And so, while I feel like this move should have been announced sooner, and we'll get into that in a second, we do finally have our announcement that came out just yesterday about the Premier Season 3 coming out, as well as change to the map pool, some CT changes and things of that nature that we will get into here in just a second. But before we do, if you have not already, please do subscribe to the channel. If you're enjoying the content, it would really help out a lot as far as growing the channel goes. You've already seen a lot of growth, but looking to just kind of continue that trend. Also, leaving a comment, leaving a like, those things certainly go a long way. And it'd be nice to hear your opinions in the comments as far as what you think about these changes in your own right. Have a little bit of a community discussion, so to speak. But without further ado, let's get into this. As you know, we had the Premier Season 3 beginning last night, just over 12 hours ago whenever I got this. And so obviously new for Season 3 was that the active duty map pool, Overpass is back in, Anubis is out. And then they made some gameplay changes when it came to the MP9, the Incendiary grenade, and a few other things here and there. They also did something with trade protection, which I'm not really going to get too much into, but I know that some people were certainly up in arms about that. But before we kind of get into the changes themselves, one, I really feel like changes like these need to be better synced up with the majors and with the competitive seasons of Counter-Strike. We have now found ourselves in CS2 in a position that we've always wanted to be in, where we have very clear-cut seasons of Counter-Strike for the competitive scene, and we also have really good placement of the majors. And so what I mean by that is you kind of start out the year with some events in kind of the January, February time frame, and you build up to that mid-year major, right? And then you play that major, and then you have that month or so, let's say, break before the second season starts in the year, sometime in late July, early August, which is what we're seeing kind of right now. And then you play another season of Counter-Strike in the competitive scene, and then you have your end-of-year major that kind of starts in November and bleeds into early December, and then boom, you're off again. You have your holidays with, you know, the end of holidays for December and into the new year, and then you pick right back up in, let's say, mid to late January, early February, and then you just kind of keep going through that cycle of these mid-year majors and end-year majors and these seasons that kind of form around them, right? Season 1 being from, let's say, January to the end of the first major, and then the second season being, you know, right after the first major and into the final major of the year, right? And I think that's a great system to have. You know, it really kind of defines how we go about covering the competitive world of Counter-Strike. And it also gives kind of a set schedule for kind of just the community to follow, teams to follow, players to follow, you name it. Now, obviously, we're kind of slowly but surely eating away at the player break a bit. It used to be something that was well more defined, and, you know, there was even a players union behind it that really kind of mandated a month-long break before the next season started, and we're kind of seeing people chip away at that a little bit, with Fissure technically kind of being in part of what the player break should have been. You know, realistically, I Am Cologne should have been the first event after the supposed player break here, after the Blast Austin Major. So we're kind of seeing that player break not be as well defined as it used to be. And at the end of the day, teams and players can decide for themselves how much they want to use the player break as an actual break, and then how much they want to use it to practice and get prepared for the next season. And this is especially the case for teams who are going through roster changes, maybe teams who want to jump on and get a competitive edge when it comes to adopting the new map that comes to the pool. But I really do overall like this, the, you know, sequence that we have, I guess you could say. And I also do like the idea of every season should see a map pool change. Now, I wouldn't mind seeing a more drastic map pool change. I wouldn't have minded, let's say, if when they brought Overpass in for Anubis here, that they also brought in, you know, Cash or something for Inferno or Mirage or something along those lines. But I guess Cash isn't quite ready yet. I feel like there's still some FPS issues on that map performance-wise. There's still some issues with, like, shadows in certain areas that are kind of weird. And so I think that map probably still needs a little bit of polish and love before it's ready. But even if we're not going to go the dramatic route, I do think at least changing one map every season is nice. But we need to sync up these seasons better. In my opinion, with the CS dev team, if they're going to do these competitive seasons like this, line them up with the, you know, the majors, line them up with the competitive scene. And so what I mean by that is, you know, I think during a major, whether it be, you know, after the grand finals are over as like a sneak peek for the next season, or, you know, maybe you do it right before the show match and then you make the new map coming into the pool, the show match map, whatever the case may be, announce the changes that you're going to make for the next season at the major. So that way, everyone knows in the entire scene, all the teams, all the players, you know, everything like that, understand that, okay, this major is the end of the season, and after this player break, when we come back and we start the next season, we are going to have to be prepared for this map to come into the pool. We're going to have to be prepared for these changes. So if at the Blast Austin Major, you know, for the show match before the grand final, if they had played that show match on Overpass, said, "Yep, Overpass is coming to the pool for Anubis next season," and then they also explain, "Hey, these are the changes that are going to be taking place with certain weapons or economy, whatever the case may be. That's what's coming next season. Be prepared." Then you play your grand finals, you end that season, and then you have your break, and then everybody knows when they come into the next season that they're going to have to be ready for this new map and these changes. Now, I have seen some pretty stupid logic being posted out there where folks are like, well, but then you kind of ruin the player break because, you know, you give them this news about new changes, you know, and that means that they can't really take a break because the teams that decide not to take a break will get an advantage. Oh, boo fucking who? Boo fucking who? I think that that's way better than just slamming it out there in the middle of the season. It's way more disruptive to be coming out and making a change like this to the map pool, making changes to the game a week before, you know, a big tournament starts or something along those lines, as opposed to doing it several weeks in advance, and then people get to pick and choose. You can still take your break, but maybe certain teams are going to jump the gun and want to get a head start. And that's perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with that. You know, everybody's on an equal playing field at that point. Everyone's getting the information at the same time. What you choose to do with it is up to you. A lot of teams are already probably cutting their player break short anyway to deal with roster changes and embedding new players and kind of figuring things out for the next season. You know, it is what it is. You know, I'd rather see that than see only a week's notice before you have to be prepared to play, Overpass, go into the pool and, you know, deal with these changes and all that jazz. So that's kind of where I'm at. But as far as the changes go, let's talk first about, obviously, Overpass coming to the map pool for Anubis. Now, look, I was someone who didn't necessarily hate Anubis. You know, I thought it was a fine map to play and to watch to some degree, but there were clearly some issues with the map in the sense that it was very T-sided, for one, in a game where it was already quite T-sided due to the economy and things of that nature anyway. I think it was a map where it was very hard for CTs to be very proactive and get away with it. I think if you push long B or you push A main, there's so many angles you had to worry about as a CT, which made it very difficult to try to get information and try to play off of that. The best you could really do is maybe get a little bit aggressive middle. Maybe you could like instant smoke the stairs and actually like push beacon into water, you know, jump out the mid window. And I saw some crazy little aggressive plays like that from CTs, but trying to get aggressive on the extremities was very difficult, and, you know, very difficult to rotate when T's controlled middle. And it just seemed like a map that was a little bit one-sided and could use some changes. And maybe we will get those changes. Again, it was nice. It was exciting because it was different. It was new. You know, that was fine. But I do think that the map was just a little bit lopsided. I think you started to see games kind of play out over and over again the same way, where it was all about just could you get enough CT rounds on your CT side to be competitive, and then obviously you did the bulk of your work on the T side. And yeah, it just kind of was looking a little bit lopsided, and there were some teams who certainly made good use of it. You know, I think of like Aurora, and formerly Eternal Fire, obviously made good use of it. Mongols had made good use of it. There's plenty of top teams that were able to put Anubis to good use. Hell, even Vitality, even though they barely played it, when they did, they could make good use of it, and that's what made, you know, their map pool so well-rounded. But I do feel like this kind of made sense to come out as far as quality of maps. Now, personally, I would have loved to have seen Inferno come out, just because it's still having its issues, in my opinion, that need to be kind of fleshed out. I know a lot of people were calling for Mirage to come out of the pool just because it's been around for so damn long and it hasn't really changed at all. But I actually kind of like Mirage overall as a competitive map. I think it's a map that is you make of it what you will. You can decide how you want to play it. Do you want to play more default? Do you want to go very execute oriented? Do you want to do the fast 2-3 or 4-1 splits? It is a map where it's kind of like the world is your oyster on the T side on how you want to play it and when you want to call certain things. And on the CT side, it's a map that provides for a lot of variety. Like, yeah, sure, in theory, you could play it kind of the old school way, like 2-1-2, where you have a roaming opper, you got your B anchor, your B rotator, you got your A con player, your A anchor, and you can kind of just play off of that default. But it's also a map that provided for CTs to get aggressive in middle with multiple players if they wanted to with the right utility and the right timing. Or a situation where you could push Palace, you could get forward on A ramp, you could take those more forward angles. Same, with jumping into underpass and trying to take fights there early in the round. Or maybe getting forward in the B apartments. It's a map where oppers in particular could be very mobile and, kind of change their opening locations, whether they wanted to go for a quick pick at middle through connector, or they wanted to make some kind of play to, somehow counter the window smoke, get a shot off from it, and then move around, or, get aggressive in B apartments and take a pick and fall back, or even hold the line. It provided for a lot of variety, and you can learn a lot about a team's style and character on how they played Mirage. So I've always liked Mirage, but I can understand people want to at least see some type of aesthetic upgrade, just kind of making it look better, like we saw when Overpass obviously got its upgrade visually, Inferno got upgrades visually. So I could see that, don't get me wrong, but I still think it's a good competitive map and I still enjoy watching it, so I don't mind seeing it stay personally. But as far as Overpass coming back in, I mean, this is awesome. I've always loved Overpass. I think they did a great job, making it aesthetically more pleasing whenever, they brought it into the pool. We haven't seen it now for over a year. Essentially, the last time we really saw it played as a main focus was the Copenhagen Major, the first major of CS2. We did see it at EPL just after that major, and then by IEM Dallas, it was gone, of course. And so it's been gone for a little over a year. But bringing it back, it's a great tactical map. It's more of a CT-sided map, obviously, but I think that's something we could desperately use in the pool in a game that has been more T-sided lately. I think having a CT-sided map is fine. Really, the only other, true CT-sided map that we really have is Nuke, but we definitely see Ts being able to do a lot more on the map than they used to over the years. So yeah, I don't mind it coming in to kind of balance out the map pool a little bit. I think it's also a great tactical map. I think it provides for, again, the ability to, on the CT side, move your opera around a lot. Decide how aggressive you want to get towards Fountain and towards Playground on the A side of the map. Decide if you want to push into short B. Decide if you want to get aggressive inside the connector or blue, whatever you want to call it. It provides for a lot of options for CTs and their CT opper to do a lot of different things, to kind of stage themselves throughout the course of the round on what they're looking for. And then on the T side, yeah, you can play default. You can do your whole kind of 3-1-1, one connector, 1B, three guys working control of Fountain into control of the bathrooms and setting up for different types of executes or falling back or what have you. But then you can go for your fast set pieces for each site. You can also move around your opera a good bit looking for stuff. You have your instant utility you can use to try to stuff people, like CT stuffing Monster right out of spawn, right at the beginning of the round. T's being able to molly short B as a kind of a counter to that, where that gives them better short B control early, even if you're taking away the monster threat from them, and kind of the push and pull of that in the early round. And then how you play out the mid-round situations is also a lot of fun, using kind of a transitionary tool to threaten both sides kind of simultaneously and then pick and choose where you want to go. I don't know. I've really enjoyed the map. I think it's a fun, exciting tactical map, and I'm glad to see it back in the pool, and can't wait to see some matches on it. Now, as far as some of the gameplay changes that took place, we can kind of focus in here on these, and that is, of course, that the Incendiary grenade now spreads rapidly. It's pretty much instant. So when you throw your Incendiary down as a CT now, it pretty much fully blooms right after it explodes. And I think that this is definitely a nice buff to the CT Incendiary. I think that the nerf that it got a while back was overkill, and it actually has been very harmful to CTs. And so I think that this is actually a nice change. I think one of the biggest things it's going to provide is Ts aren't going to be able to catch timings on it as easily. Right now, what you saw is depending on when your Incendiary landed, Ts could just disrespect it and run right through it and just catch a kill and take limited damage and therefore limited risk to actually go for a play and catch a timing on someone. It made anchoring and using Incendiaries as a tool to stall not nearly as effective as it used to be, which piling on to some of the other things that made the map in game a little bit more T-sided, it really just kind of added another layer of that to it by having the Incendiary be so weak. But now, with the fire spreading more rapidly, I think that this gives the ability for CTs to fight for map control a little bit better, like banana control on Inferno. I think is going to, kind of be a little bit different now with this Incendiary fire spreading more rapidly. It's going to make T's a little bit harder to force through stuff and to try to catch timings. You can push people out, I think, a little bit better with it because, when it hits at first, people can kind of hide away from it as it's expanding and then take less damage or just less risk in general. So I do like this change. What I will say, though, is I think that they could have done even more. I wouldn't have minded Incendiaries lasting longer, maybe just a little bit longer, in my opinion, because then it would allow people to anchor solo a little bit better, which gives CTs a little bit more freedom to maybe rotate a little bit more or stack a little bit more and not just get completely crushed. So, I do think there is a fine line, though, of giving CTs too much utility power to where they can stall out the game for too long and then rounds drag out a little bit too long and it gets a little bit wonky at that point. But I do think that if they just would have brought the Incendiary back to where it was before they nerfed it initially, I think it would have been fine. I think the way the game has progressed, you can kind of go back to the old school Incendiaries and you would be fine. But at least this is a step in the right direction, and we'll just have to see how it plays out. Maybe we'll find that this does good enough. It solves the problem. Or we will find that maybe it still needs a little bit of a buff, and that's the case where Valve can come in and just slowly dial it in. They're dialing in at first right now by making it spread more rapidly and cover more area and kind of decrease timing, exploits that can happen. But maybe we'll find, okay, we need to make it last a little bit longer now too, and they'll be able to make that change at some point in the future if need be. Now, then you had the MP9 increasing its recoil and substantially reducing its jump accuracy. This is nice. The MP9 has been kind of a run-and-gun cheap eco weapon or force buy weapon for the CTs. I don't mind seeing it nerfed a little bit because it's still viable. It's still going to be the same price. It still has a manageable recoil if you're not running and gunning. And so you can still get value out of it in saves and force buys in certain positions. You just have to plan a little bit more accordingly on how you're going to use it because you can't just get buck wild with it and get away with having, such limited recoil to have to deal with when you're kind of going for more of a run and gun play style. And reducing the jump accuracy, yeah, I love that. I don't like jumping accuracy in general. I would just love to see jumping accuracy globally be worse because I honestly am one of those guys who hate watching, on DusT2 when Ts are planning on a platform and CTs are just jumping up at elevator or whatever and just easily killing people as they're planting the bomb or easily using that as an option to help them retake. I just think situations like that, it doesn't feel like CS to me. CS is a tactical FPS. Jump shotting to me feels more arcadey just in general. And I know it's got to be somewhat a part of the game because I know that retaking can be more difficult. And so being able to jump spray someone planting a bomb on a higher elevation than where you're coming from, like DusT2, at least makes retaking a little bit more viable. Since we know that when CTs are out of position, retakes can be quite difficult, especially on certain maps. But at the same time, jumping accuracy has always felt cheap to me because it does feel a little bit RNG because sometimes you're going to jump shoot somebody and it's not going to work, but sometimes it is going to work. It can have so much impact. And to me, that just leaves a little bit too much to chance, a little bit too much to RNG, and I just don't like RNG. I'd rather just see, textbook Counter-Strike taking place, when it's the tactical shooter that it is. But whatever, it is what it is. I am totally fine with this nerf to the MP9. I think this will maybe open the door for other SMGs to get used, like the UMP. I think the MP9 will still be viable. I just think that now you're going to have to be a little bit more thoughtful about how you're putting it into play. And then finally, in competitive modes, CTs now receive a $50 team award for each terrorist eliminated in a round. So to kind of explain this a little bit, normally with most guns in the game, there are exceptions, obviously. When you are a individual player, when you get a frag, you get $300. Only to you. But now, if you get that frag, you're getting $350 to yourself, basically, because you're getting the $300 you would already normally get for the individual kill. You're getting a $50 team reward to yourself and the rest of your team. So basically, your one kill gives you $350, and then everybody else in your team is going to get $50, right? And you can kind of see how that could really balloon up, because if you got a guy who goes out and gets a triple kill, You know, he's going to be able to get his 900 individual dollars if he's using like an M4 or whatever, but then he's also going to get an additional $150 for himself. So he's went from 900 to 1050, and then everybody else on the team was able to get an additional 150 bucks, or whatever the case may be. And this balloons because this is every single round, no matter what. So if you're able to get some wins on the board, not only are you getting the money for the win and for the kills that you would normally get, you're also ballooning your economy even more with these $50 team award bonuses that allows you to build your economy a little bit more when you're on a successful run, which means that you're going to be a little bit better off for a rainy day. You're going to be a little bit less off on a reset. It's not going to hurt you nearly as much. And, you know, it's going to allow you to maybe in certain situations where you've only had money for SMG, now you can buy FAMAS. Or maybe, you know, you can go from that FAMAS to an M4. Or maybe you're going to have a round where, you know, in the past, you would only be able to get like M4 Armory limited utility. Now you're going to be able to make sure you get your full utility set or get close to it at least. So this is definitely a step in the right direction for buffing the CT economy, but I don't know if this was enough, in my opinion. And this is just a gut reaction. I have to wait and watch competitive CS and see how much it makes things change. I definitely think that CTs who get on a little bit of a run, this will really balloon up their economy and help them out in case things falter in like the mid to late half. So I definitely see the advantage there. I definitely see that it could somewhat promote chasing kills a little bit more, because now not only are you getting your individual kill reward for hunting down kills, and not only are you limiting the T's economy, you know, making them lose their weapons and have to rebuy, but then you're also building up a team award for everyone else on your team. And so in those situations where, like, let's say you have a couple of guys who are saving their M4s, but then you have like one guy with an SMG and he decides to go hunting T's that are saving, or something like that, not only is he able to, again, kind of destroy the T economy a little bit, build up his individual economy, you know, if he's getting like, you know, the additional bonus because he's using a weaker weapon that has a higher kill reward for himself individually, he's doing that, and he's building up $50, you know, for each of his teammates as well on top of that. So I can definitely see that promoting hunting a little bit more, or just helping CTs kind of, you know, with momentum, kind of build their economy better for the rest of the half. But what I feel like it still may not solve is think of those situations on Inferno where you get into like a mid-round 3-on-3 situation or a late-round situation or a 2-on-2, whatever the case may be, and you know that retaking is not really viable. And so you're just going to have to save. We all know this, right? That's been one of the knocking points on Inferno for a while, is the fact that retaking is so hard, and if you're out of position, you don't really have a hope in the world, and you're better off just saving your weapons and moving on. This doesn't solve those problems, in my opinion, because if you have a weapon to save, that is still going to have a higher value than chasing after $350 if you get one kill with your weapon and that $50 team reward, and everybody else in your team getting $50. It's just not as worth it to go for that. Like, you'd still rather save the gun, in my opinion. So I think if you're a CT team that gets behind the 8-ball very early and you are losing repeatedly, I don't know that this really necessarily helps you all that much. I think you're still in a tough spot because, yeah, you're building up some additional reward on the rounds that you win, but if you're on that losing streak, I don't really see how this is helping you that much. I think the CT economy could still be punishing in those cases, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm just totally off base with the math and it actually checks out and it's going to be great. But personally, I would have thought the better way to go about it would have just been increasing the floor of the CT economy. So rather than both T and CTs having the same floor loss bonus, so, you know, like the 1400 or I know it's 1900 after a pistol round, but you get my point. Like, just making the floor higher for CTs, let them start at that 1900 no matter what, or maybe you find another number that makes sense for both sides to have as their floor loss bonus. I think that would have been a more global way to attack the CT economy being under fire that would not have been conditional. But to some degree, I also like the fact that you have to kind of earn that reward, you know, you have to chase after that reward that the CTs can get that the Ts can't get. You know, you have to be a little bit proactive to go out there and get it. It's not just given to you. So I can kind of see both sides of it. Again, we will just have to see how it plays out over time. But folks, that's going to do it for this video, going over the Premier Season 3 changes and thus the changes that will now impact the competitive season for all of our top tournaments. And overall, I think these are great changes. I mean, personally, I love Overpass coming back. I think it's definitely better than Anubis in quality. I think there's some other things we could be looking at in the map pool, but this is a nice step, in my opinion. And then, yeah, I like the idea that we are trying to do some things that make the CT economy a little bit better and just help CTs out a bit in general. I think the Incendiary buff is good. I think the economy, new bonus thing is good. But will they be good enough is going to be the big question. Are Incendiary still going to need a little bit more tuning to be a little bit stronger, or is this enough? Do we need to see a different approach to helping out the CT economy as opposed to just this additional $50 team reward? Only time will tell. These are certainly steps in the right direction. This is a great update. I personally would have loved to see more stuff, though, like performance updates. There's been some FPS issues for people out there, including people like me who don't even have that bad of a PC. So some optimizations and some things like that would have been cool. Obviously, everybody wants to see, movement tweaks and accuracy tweaks and anti-cheat getting better and all these like really global things that we care about. And hopefully those things will come at some point. But these were some nice changes for sure. I enjoy it. I hope you do too. And again, folks, make sure you subscribe, like, comment. I'll catch you next time.